What if the problem isn't your life? It's that you've quietly outgrown it. Hi, I'm Susie, and if you've ever had the quiet thought of, my life looks fine, but why doesn't it feel right? You're exactly where you need to be. This is your space for real conversations about identity shifts. Feeling stuck in your life and those subtle moments of emotional disconnect that don't show up on the outside, but you feel them in your body, in your energy, in the way things just don't land the same anymore. Around here, we go deeper than surface level personal growth. We unpack what's actually happening when your outer world still works, but your inner world is asking for something more. And you can't quite explain why. So, if you've been questioning your direction, sitting in that uncomfortable space of purpose, confusion, or quietly wondering why you don't fully recognize yourself in your own life anymore, I want you to hear this right away. You're not lost and you're not behind. Something in you is shifting, and by the end of this Signals and Standards episode, you're going to understand what's really happening beneath that feeling of life misalignment and how to start moving through it with clarity, self trust, and a whole lot less self doubt. Stay with me. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Susie, where we decode mixed messages, elevate your standards, and deliver practical insights that you can act on. I'm your empowerment coach, Susie, here to guide you from confusion to clarity, helping you reclaim your power and create the relationships and life you deserve. There's a version of stuck that doesn't look stuck at all. You're getting things done, you're showing up, you're being responsible. From the outside, your life checks all the boxes, but internally, something feels kind of off, like you're living slightly out of sync with yourself. Not enough to disrupt everything, but enough that you can't ignore it anymore. And what's interesting is that psychology actually recognizes this exact experience. That feeling of being fine but not fulfilled is often tied to deeper internal transitions. Not failure at all, not laziness, but a signal that something within you is shifting. This is where a lot of people mislabel what they're going through. They think they've lost motivation, they think they need more discipline. But what's actually happening is deeper than that. It's identity. Because when your identity begins to evolve, your old drivers, the things that used to push you forward, stop working the same way. And suddenly it feels like you're the problem. When really, the strategy just no longer matches who you are. Identity doesn't shift loudly most of the time. It doesn't announce itself with some dramatic breakdown. It starts quietly, like a slow internal calibration. The things that used to excite you don't hit the same. Goals that once felt meaningful now feel like obligations. You find yourself saying, I don't know, more often, not because you're lost, but because the old answers don't really fit anymore. And according to research on identity development, this is actually how change tends to happen. Gradually, internally, often long before anything external reflects it. Sometimes people call this a life crisis in general, but even that framing can be misleading because it's not always a crisis in the way we think. It's often a confrontation between who you've been and who you're becoming. A moment where your internal truth starts asking better questions than a current life can answer. Psychology calls this something close to self concept inertia, the idea that your life structure often lags behind who you've become internally. You evolve faster than your routines, your roles, even your relationships. So you end up living in a version of your life that reflects who you were, not who you are now. And that gap, that's what creates the discomfort. It can show up as emotional detachment. You're there, but not fully there. Conversations feel surface level. Even your own reactions feel muted sometimes. It's not that you don't care, it's that something deeper isn't being met. And when you stay in that misalignment for too long, it doesn't just affect your mindset, it can impact your overall well being, your energy, even your health, because you're constantly operating out of sync with your core values. And here's the part that matters: that disconnect is not dysfunction, it's information. It's your internal system signaling this doesn't match anymore. In identity shift psychology, this is seen as a critical awareness phase. The moment you start recognizing that your current identity no longer feels like home. There's also this pressure to figure it out immediately, to replace the old with something clear and defined. But identity shifts don't work like that. There's a middle space, a kind of in between phase, where you're no longer who you were, but not fully anchored in who you're becoming. And this space, while uncomfortable, is actually really necessary. It's where exploration happens, it's where your identity expands without being forced into something premature. And that space, it feels messy and uncertain, sometimes even empty. You might feel like you're drifting a bit, like nothing is fully clicking. But that doesn't mean you're regressing. It often means you're detaching from an identity that no longer fits, which is a key part of evolving into something more aligned. But it's also where the real growth happens. Because when you're not operating on autopilot anymore, you start to notice things. What drains you? What feels performative? What you've been tolerating out of habit, not alignment. You start questioning the roles you've outgrown, the patterns that no longer feel true to you, and those expectations that don't actually belong to you. This awareness is actually the foundation of living in alignment. So it's bringing your life back into connection with your values, with your identity, and your sense of purpose. A lot of people think alignment means making big dramatic changes, walking away, starting over, blowing things up. But most of the time, alignment begins much more quietly. It starts with honesty, noticing by allowing yourself to admit this doesn't feel like me anymore. Because identity isn't fixed, it's something that continues to evolve as you do. That awareness alone begins to shift everything. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if you've been feeling this in your personal and professional relationships too, where you're showing up, you're responding, you're doing what you've always done, but something feels slightly disconnected, I want you to slow this down for a second and really sit with it. Because the instinct is to either ignore it or rush to fix it. To tell yourself you're overthinking or to jump straight into what do I do about this? But what if for right now we didn't do either? What if we just got curious? Sometimes we stay engaged in dynamics out of habit, out of history, out of the version of ourselves that originally built that connection. But you're not that same version anymore. And your current self has different needs, different standards, and different emotional capacity than it used to. So instead of forcing clarity, I want you to start with something much simpler and more honest. Start noticing. Notice how you feel before an interaction. Notice how you feel during it. And especially notice how you feel after. Not what you think, what you actually feel in your body. Drained, neutral, energized, slightly off? You don't need to analyze it yet. Just track it. Then give yourself permission to pause before automatically responding or showing up the way you always have. Even a small pause, taking a breath before replying, or choosing not to overextend in a moment starts to reconnect you to yourself. And here's the part people skip. Be honest with yourself privately before you try to be clear with anyone else. You don't need to confront, explain, or make any big decisions right now. Your only job is to stop overriding what you're noticing. Because that quiet awareness you keep brushing past, that's not confusion, that's information. And the more you respect it, even in small, manageable ways, the more your clarity will start to build naturally. Not forced, not rushed, but grounded. So your only real action step here is this. Stay connected to yourself in moments you would normally disconnect. That's it. Because alignment in relationships doesn't start with changing the relationship. It starts with no longer abandoning yourself inside of it. I remember a period in my life where my relationships all looked stable, even good from the outside, but internally something felt off. Certain friendships didn't land the same anymore. Conversations felt a bit forced, and I'd leave feeling more drained than connected. Honestly, it was a bit stale. But instead of listening to that, I ignored it. I told myself to be grateful, to not overthink, to stay loyal to what had always been. So I kept showing up as the version of me that had built those connections, even though I was already changing underneath. And the more I ignored it, the more disconnected I felt. What I didn't understand then is that you can have meaningful relationships and still be misaligned with them. Feeling disconnected doesn't mean something is wrong with you or that you're ungrateful. It often means you're evolving, you're growing, and the confusion that comes with that, it's not a failure. It's personal growth before clarity. The shift didn't come from making a big decision about those relationships. It came when I stopped arguing with what I was feeling and started listening to it instead. Because alignment in relationships doesn't start with cutting people off. It starts with being honest with yourself about what no longer fits. Then working towards making a choice of who gets to stay or not. And this is where I want to leave you with something simple. So repeat after me. I trust my evolution. I trust my evolution. I trust my evolution. Because that's really what this is. Not confusion, not failure, evolution, growth. It might feel unclear right now, but that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're in transition. And the more you trust that what you're feeling has meaning, even without full clarity yet, the less you'll pressure yourself to force answers that don't fit. Give it space. Let it unfold. Real clarity doesn't come from rushing. It comes from listening. So if your life feels fine, but something inside feels off, don't rush to label it as a problem, or worse, try to fix it too quickly. This isn't necessarily something breaking down. It's something within you shifting, quietly asking for a more honest version of how you live, connect, and show up. You don't need a full plan. You don't need immediate clarity. What you need is the willingness to stop overriding what you already feel, to recognize that even subtle disconnection has meaning, that even quiet discomfort is pointing somewhere. Because this phase isn't about having answers, it's about telling yourself the truth, being true to yourself. And the moment you start doing that, even in small ways, things begin to realign. Not all at once and not perfectly, but in a way that actually reflects who you are now, not who you used to be. And that's the shift. That's where everything begins. Thank you for being here and leaning into the quiet identity shifts that happen when life still works but doesn't quite feel like you anymore. This isn't always a breakdown. It's often evolution beginning on the inside before anything changes outside. Real alignment starts the moment you stop overriding what you feel and start listening to it. You can catch this episode and more insights on Signals and Standards with Susie across your favorite podcast platforms. And if this resonated, you can connect with me at powercoachsusie.com. I read every message and I'm right here with you as you grow into a life that actually reflects who you've become. Remember to subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, trust what's shifting. It's already pointing you forward. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at PowerCoachSusie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsusie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Susie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.